Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
Below the studio display, and it's kind of like this reference monitor that you can have. Like, I am working on the big display, but I can open up maybe Safari on the iPad and still see and interact with the website. I can also grab it. I don't like the cable because it's kind of in the way, but I can grab it, start taking notes with the Apple Pencil.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. This episode's guest I came across from a boosted post on Mastodon, where Zsolt wrote about whether merging the iPad and the Mac is a good idea. And I, like the author, agreed that no, that should not be the future of the iPad. Beyond that discussion, we dive into how he uses both his 11-inch M2 iPad Pro and his recently acquired iPad mini. You can read his work over at https://decoding.io. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros for as little as $1 a month. And believe it or not, that dollar really does help a great deal and is very much appreciated. You can also subscribe in Apple Podcasts. My thanks to everyone that supports this podcast. It is most welcome and very much appreciated. And if you haven't left a review yet on Apple Podcasts, I'd really appreciate that as well. If you don't have $1 to toss this way, a review on Apple Podcasts really does go a long way. So thank you if you have left one, and I'd really appreciate you just taking a minute today to do just that. With that, here's my discussion. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Zsolt. Can you first share a bit on your current iPad setup? And welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Well, my iPad setup is kind of shifting right now. Basically, was switching from a 2018 iPad Pro to the M2 one. So I had the Magic Keyboard, so I went with the 11-inch because I didn't want to get a new one, like a new Magic Keyboard.
Yeah, they're expensive. You could buy a whole low-end iPad for them.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, I stayed with the 11-inch, but I maybe regret that now. I actually quite envy the 12.9-inch for my use. So yeah, I have the 11-inch M2 iPad Pro, and a couple of 2 months ago, I seen a really nice discount on an iPad mini, the latest one. Yeah. And I just couldn't skip it. So basically, I use 2 iPads now. And they're great.
Well, welcome to the dual iPad club. I primarily just use the 12.9, but I also have an old 10.5-inch iPad I occasionally use for some things.
Yeah, I was kind of weird with iPads always. I tried, when the 12.9-inch was released, the first version, I actually got the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, which was the first, smaller
first one, and then they went to 10, 5.
Yeah, so I had that. It was kind of a weird experience for first, administrating 2 iPads. But my current use is actually both of my iPads doing completely different things, so it's going to make sense to have 2.
Yeah, I did the dual second gen iPad Pro, the 12.9 and the 10.5, and I loved having the same generation on the same iPad Pro, different screen sizes, because all the hardware was matched, the screen technology and everything, and just it was good. And back in those days, I used the Logitech charging stand, so they were just it was a very clean desk setup. I had both of them just wirelessly on the stand there with the keyboard. Anyways, enough sidetracking. So I wanted to have you on because I came across a post you made on your site about this ongoing debate about the future of the iPad, and we're going to close out the discussion with that conversation. Before we get to that, first off, what role does the iPad play in your life? Are you iPad only? Do you kind of augment with a server or Mac, or what kind of place does the iPad serve for you?
Do you want me the long answer or the short answer? Because I can rumble up about the iPad.
The short answer, because I think we're going to dive into the nitty gritty and some follow up questions here.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I mentioned, I started with the M2 iPad Pro. It was my only iPad for a couple of months, and I mostly use right now. This is my next to the Mac, my most Pro iPad. I mean, it's in the name.
Yeah.
So that's mostly augmenting my Mac. I'm a programmer, so I do my job on a MacBook Pro, and I have a big desk setup and things like that. But the iPad Pro is there for as a like just keeping an eye on Slack, the weather, stuff like a dashboard basically.
Yeah.
Throughout the day, and when I'm basically finished with my job, I usually do some writing to my blog and stuff like that. So I try to do it on the iPad Pro because it's I have a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is it's a notebook, but it's not the most portable thing to have around. So I kind of keep it like a desktop computer. So my MacBook Pro, sorry, my iPad Pro also serves me like a small laptop, basically.
Yeah.
So that's basically my 11-inch iPad Pro. The iPad Mini is that's a completely different story. When Apple started to do these newish like trackpad support and the Magic Keyboard and stuff like that, like the iPad started to become this like multiple ways to use it, and then you can decide basically what you want to do. The iPad Mini still feels like the original iPad, like it's a tablet, so that it doesn't want to do too much, and it's really portable. So I mostly use like the classic iPad Mini use case, which is just consuming stuff like reading. That's kind of a standard thing to do on the iPad Pro, and it's sort of on the iPad Mini, but it's my iPad to beat an iPad. It's basically
the tablet-y.
The tablet-y one.
Yeah. And you said your current job's programming. Is it native apps, web apps? What do you?
I do web apps basically. So I'm a Ruby developer.
Okay.
Ruby and JavaScript developer. These days, it's like everything a little bit between. So, but I actually try to do native app development as well. Like just. Started to mess around with Swift Playground on the iPad Pro a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to learn Swift.
Right.
So, but my job is just web these days.
As far as web development, Safari's the bottleneck for being able to do that work on iPad. Like if Apple opened up third-party browsers is with a like having full Chrome, or what kind of what's blocking web development from taking off an iPad?
I'm not the guy who complains about Safari, to be honest. I mean, I like Safari and I use Safari. Actually, I kind of loathe Chrome because it's slow, and I just don't like Electron apps, which is also based on Chrome. So I don't know. I like the web being open, but the iPad is like the balance of keeping native apps and like the web stuff. At the end, I don't want Electron, leaking into the iPad OS part of things. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good to have options like Chrome maybe going to behave better on iPad OS than it does on the desktop.
Yeah, there's 3 rendering engines? There's Safari, Chrome, and is Firefox their own unique rendering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are unique, but I don't know. I enjoy like having Safari, like the Safari engine in each browser. To be honest, I don't use Chrome on iPad OS. It's not my work computer, so I usually don't even test stuff on directly on the device until I have to. So I just use iOS Simulator on the desktop. And for now, I know a lot of people want to have like these engines, but I don't know. I'm just afraid that we're gonna just see more Electron apps ported to iPad OS. That's gonna be bad, to be honest.
Yeah.
For the platform.
Yeah. I know people can do good things with it, but it's not the same. It really isn't.
No. No, I'm quite like I have a kind of weird job because I'm doing web development, but I don't like to use web apps. I'm become kind of a native Mac, native iPad app guy.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite apps for iPad?
Let me just open my home screen because that's the easiest one. Yeah, mostly I use on the iPad Pro, I have like Things, Drafts, iWriter, DevonThink. Shortcuts, of course. I like that one too. Mostly I use those apps on both iPads daily. Yeah. On the iPad Pro, I also do some other stuff, like MindNote is kind of an iPad Pro app for me.
Yeah.
Also Ulysses, which is, I know it's kind of weird that I have iWriter and Ulysses as well, but those have both served me in a different way.
Yeah.
So I use iWriter as a general Markdown editor, and Ulysses is my blog editor. Basically, you can publish articles directly. So those are the most used iPad Pro apps. On the iPad Mini, I love DevonThink, being able to just read PDFs. I do separate my PDF reading from like I have. We can talk about this more later, but like I have a focus reading and I have just like this entertainment reading part of things. So DevonThink is the one where I do like highlight stuff and just try to process PDFs basically in depth.
Yeah.
So I use that a lot on the iPad Mini. Safari, of course, I'm a heavy user of Safari on the iPad Mini as well. And I just started to like get back into cooking a lot. Yeah. Like my wife just actually wanted me to do more stuff in the kitchen, and I actually had Mela, I'm not sure how to say it. It's the same guy who did Reader.
Yeah.
And he has this cool recipe app, which I mostly use on the iPad Mini, like just having around in the kitchen and just tracking stuff while I'm cooking. So I would say those are the most interesting iPad apps right now that I'm using.
With cooking in the kitchen, do you how do you interact with the iPad and keep it all clean? Do you use like an Apple Pencil to like?
Yeah, that's kind of a question which I haven't really solved. I try to just, before I touch the iPad, just wash my hands basically. Yeah. So
gotcha.
I don't use an Apple Pencil in the kitchen. I think it's too fragile to be.
Yeah. I always want, like, is there a good like kitchen stylist to like use?
Actually, that would be nice. I'm sure there's something like that out there, but I'm just
an interesting question. Like washing an Apple Pencil, like I imagine it wouldn't survive a dishwasher, but
I don't think so.
Scrub down pretty easily, except the tip part, maybe.
I mean, I killed a couple of Apple Pencils just by dropping them, so I don't think they're gonna take the dishwasher that well. So.
Yeah. And what about things do you gravitate to towards that versus reminders or OmniFocus?
I'm basically moving between these things like constantly. I'm a kind of a GTD nerd, and I'd love to try out these apps and just write about them. So usually about like annually, I just switch because I don't know, get bored and just want to try out maybe a new version of OmniFocus is just coming out. And Reminder said this great update. Right now I'm using things. It was just because I had used things before. I used it for like 3 years when the Things Free released, and they just updated it to have shortcuts integration, which is, I think, one of the best integrations out there. Like they had shortcuts, but now you can access the database, and I think they use the newer APIs from Apple, like filtering items and things like that. So I just started to mess around with things, just doing some automation, and it just sticked. And I consider things these days like I know it's going to sounds really weird, but like I consider it like a replacement to Finder, which I know it's kind of weird.
Yeah,
but I use we have this cool app on the Mac called Hookmark. It's also available on iOS, but it's kind of limited, and you can link to basically almost everything. And what I do is set up projects in things and just have a whole lot of other stuff around it. And what I actually did is I have a keyboard shortcut to open things and open the quick find window.
Yeah.
And I can just jump into any project. And what I actually noticed on like using things this way is I'm not reaching to the Finder. I'm actually reaching to things, and I'm just clicking on links or opening. Like you can actually open links from the keyboard in things.
Yeah,
and it's just like kind of transformed how I access resources related to a project. So yeah, I did a lot of automation. Like I usually spend the Christmas just evaluating my workflow, and I think that was the time when things started to have the beta versions of the shortcuts integration.
Yeah,
and I just had like 2 weeks to mess around with it, and I just stick with it, and I think I'm going to keep it for a couple of years because I'm actually like automated the hell out of it, and I don't want to change those back like reminders or OmniFocus. But yeah,
that's really
it's cool.
How do you use shortcuts in general, like outside of things or within things? Like, what are some of the best examples you found?
I use it in a bunch of different ways. Mostly I use like I started to have shortcuts. Like I wanted to have shortcuts work in both platforms. Like sometimes even these shortcuts still around that I wrote like a long time ago. And it's basically just a big if and else shortcut. So I stopped doing those, and these days I mostly optimize for different platforms. So, but I still have some shortcuts around. I mostly use it for like my main categories. I would say is like note taking, tracking stuff, blogging, of course. Some budget related things that I have YNAB, which is I think they have an API for about like 2 or 3 years now. I wrote a couple of shortcuts against their API, weather stuff, and of course home. And I just started to integrate ChatGPT into shortcuts. So I have a couple of shortcuts related to just having text selection in whatever app in iOS and macOS too, and just send it to ChatGPT and getting the result back. So it's mostly I use it for translation and like spell checking. That's the most used features, but I can just talk to it basically from any app. So that's actually pretty cool to have in shortcuts. And I have one that's kind of crazy, but I just wanted to do it because why not? It's called Talk to My Assistant, and it basically replaces Siri. So it's kind of like a brain transplant through Siri. So you can use it on your HomePod or your phone or whatnot and just talk to ChatGPT. It's going to respond. It's going to like have this conversation back and forth. And it's actually quite useful to have around. So yeah, we use it quite heavily around the house.
That's really cool. Is that a shortcut that's shareable, or is it kind of linked to your personal ChatGPT account, or how does that work?
It is linked, but I think I can set it up in a way that, I mean, you have to have an API key, and it's a bit hard to set up to get like acquiring the API key, but it's basically reusable.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah.
Yeah, API keys are so fun within shortcuts. It really can transform that, a shortcut into its own unique app that's so different.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you use it like your brain for your automation, you can augment it with a lot of stuff. Like I actually just like started to mess around with Keyboard Maestro, and I just like maybe 2 days ago, I seen that they have a couple of shortcuts actions, which is really useful to have. And of course, the other way around, you can start shortcuts from Keyboard Maestro. So it's basically you have like all of these ways to hook into shortcuts. You can do it from AppleScript. You can do it from the terminal, which I'm doing a lot. And it's just a nice way to, of course, syncing is a big part of that as well. But it's a nice way to just think about your workflow and integrate shortcuts into your apps, basically.
Yeah. Do you automate with drafts at all, or what role does drafts have for you?
I do. I don't write too much drafts automation. I usually just download existing ones. I mean, people did an awesome. I think what the drafts community is doing is pretty great. So I mostly use other people automations. I have some of my own ones, like just sending text to different apps, like I don't know, like creating a Markdown file in iCloud Drive and stuff like that. But the latest one regarding, again, ChatGPT, I just found one to actually integrate ChatGPT in drafts, which is actually pretty cool. So it's kind of like my shortcuts for ChatGPT, but inside drafts, which is actually really helpful.
Yeah. And then DevonThink, what role does this app play for you? Like, do you have multiple databases? What kind of data are you throwing in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do another episode just about DevonThink. it's I started to mess around with DevonThink like when they released the version 3. So like 4 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
So I use it on the Mac, and I have a couple of databases. I could talk about them quickly. Basically, the first thing is the most used one is the filling system. So I have, like I mentioned, I use things like a Finder replacement or like finding my stuff.
Yeah.
DevonThink is the other part in that. So when I have any project, I just create of course, it's done by automation, but it's creating a new things project, set up another DevonThink group, and it syncs through this filling system database. So I keep all of my project-related assets there.
And everything in DevonThink is easily linkable. That's one of the cool things about it.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that's why I started to use DevonThink in the first place. So the linking is really awesome. So you can basically link to almost anything, and it's going to work across platforms. So if you have an iPad, you can just set up maybe a reading list, and you can jump from your task manager to the DevonThink assets. So I use the filling system, which is my most used database, is just containing a lot of ongoing projects organized by groups. I have one for reading. I call it after my blog is decoding. So I like to decode stuff inside it. So it's just a bunch of articles saved in PDF. I'm also I have a Mac Mini server running at home. And when I tag it with video downloads, it's going to just download the YouTube video into DevonThink, and it's going to basically appear in this database. I have one for my business things, which I actually kind of share with my accountant. So I organize my invoices and everything by month. So, and then I publish that to Google Drive, and she can access my stuff to do anything related to my business. And I'm doing this for a while now. When I get maybe a new course, like I for example, the one of the examples is the DevonThink field guide from David Sparks, which when I acquire something like that, or any like conference videos from YouTube, I usually create a database for that as well. Yeah. And I try to download the videos from the website. And I'm doing this because DevonThink has this awesome way of inserting notes, timestamps to the video. Oh, so nice. what I'm doing is I'm opening the video in DevonThink, make it full screen, but on the right side I have a small area to take notes. Yeah. And if you press Control-Command-L, it's going to insert timestamps. So it's actually a really nice way to learn. And after that, you can export these notes in Markdown and just integrate it in whatever. Nice. Maybe you have a several custom system or something like that. Yeah. How large are your databases? Do they fit within iCloud Drive? Do you use a server to sync stuff around? I use a mixed setup. So I have my biggest database is my decoding one, which is almost 20 gigs. Yeah. The other ones are smaller, and I use basically iCloud Drive to sync the decoding one because it's not the highest priority. And what I've seen is iCloud Drive syncing works in DevonThink, but it's a bit slow, at least here in Hungary. Maybe the CDN is not the best. So I have a custom web dev server running on DigitalOcean, which I sync DevonThink with. That's actually pretty fast. So okay. And I also I also use like Bonjour Sync with the video stuff. So that's sync from my Mac Mini.
Yeah. What's the iPad experience like for you on DevonThink? Do you get much utility out of it there?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I use it for reading. So like organizing stuff, I still do that on the desktop because DevonThink it still, I think, needs some work to just moving stuff around could be a bit better. Consuming content, like actually using your content from DevonThink, I think it's actually pretty great on the iPad, especially since the linking is cross-platform. So yeah, I mostly saving stuff into the inbox. I don't care which device. I can just save a photo that I took or like a screenshot that I want to remember. So I kind of use DevonThink also as a GTD inbox. So that's available in each device. So yeah, like capture and just read.
Yeah. So the different modes of your iPad, what do you find yourself using it? You mentioned the mini is a tablet kind of mode, and then your iPad Pro, is it mostly in laptop configuration, or do you sometimes hook it up to an external monitor and use it as kind of like a pseudo desktop computer in that way?
Yeah, I do. When we got the external display support, actually that was one of the reasons I just got a new iPad Pro. I wanted to try it out, and I think it's M1 only. So mostly I use it in the Magic keyboard case throughout the day, but usually on the weekends when I have time to write, I actually prefer to do it on the iPad Pro. So I have a studio display which just plugs into the iPad Pro, completely supported, and I guess that's the part where I really like Stage Manager. I don't use it much on my display because I think it's too small to have like multiple windows overlapping.
Yeah, especially 11-inch.
That's what I use, and that's so. I mean, sometimes I use it in the tablet mode. So I don't know. I prefer Stage Manager on the iPad screen for touch. Yeah, not sure why, but I mostly use it on the external display, and I actually quite like it because my most favorite way of using the iPad Pro is not in the Magic Keyboard case, but actually in the Smart Keyboard Folio or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So what I do is actually put it next to my keyboard, below the studio display, and it's kind of like this reference monitor that you can have. Like I am working on the big display, but I can open up maybe Safari on the iPad and still see and interact with the website. I can also grab it. I don't like the cable because it's kind of in the way, but I can grab it, start taking notes with the Apple Pencil. So I have both. Like my wife had the Smart Keyboard Folio. I just started to mess around with it, so I just got one for me as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting use case for the iPad Pro. I never seen that mode.
In that configuration, you'll use a different keyboard and trackpad.
Yes.
And then the iPad in the Folio, it's basically there as a stand, kind of the keyboard's hidden away in that configuration.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically my same keyboard as my MacBook Pro is used with. It's just a standard Apple keyboard and the Magic Trackpad. And I use them in wired mode because I switch between devices frequently, and I don't want to repair them. So
it's great. Every time stacked as USB keyboards, it's great. And do you have a dock that you plug into, or how do you have that?
Just the back of the studio display.
Monitor. Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, that's what I use it with. So I can just unplug my MacBook Pro, plug in the iPad Pro, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and it's kind of a fun thing having. I most of the time have my iPad on. I have a hover bar stand from 12 South, and it's kind of like a second monitor. But it is fun. Sometimes I'll when I'm working upstairs, I'll have it in front of me, and it's kind of like in that touch mode where you're just like touching there, and you have the big monitor up above it, and it's a nice setup.
Yeah, I tried those stands. I don't know. I just like it to be this way. Like when you have, like I have two displays already, so I don't have that many
Yes.
I don't want to have another one, basically, just for another display for my Mac.
No,
so
I get it. Yeah.
So yeah.
When they added trackpad support, how big of a deal was that for you when the Magic Keyboard came out? Was that like a moment where it's like, oh, I'm going to start doing these tasks here where I used to do them on the MacBook?
Actually, it was kind of funny. I was really against the trackpad for like a long time. So I was just imagining that Apple was just going to have this Mac-like experience where you have this arrow cursor, and it's like, why do we need that moment? Yeah. And when they showed, I think it was an ad during COVID that they
it was for the 2020 iPad in May, I believe.
Yeah, where I think Craig Federighi showed the Magic Keyboard and this whole trackpad integration, and I wouldn't say I was blown away, but I was reconsidering my opinions about, like, do we need trackpad or mouse integration for the iPad? And it's kind of blended into my workflows. I don't really think about it anymore. Yeah. It's just there, and it's working awesome. So yeah, it's definitely contributed. Like, it was like a multi-year progress to do when they first introduced the the cursor integration, and then I think it was a year later when they introduced universal control, and that was the step when I started to think about, okay, the iPad is actually useful in the workflow that I'm mostly in.
When you're using the Magic Keyboard in laptop configuration, do you hook stuff up to that little USB-C port on that keyboard ever?
No.
Okay.
I don't really do that. Well, the studio display, that's the only thing.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. As far as like accessories, is the Magic Keyboard and Apple Pencil do you have any others of note?
Well, I have the 12-out Stay and Go Mini, this dock thing,
the USB-C kind of hub thing.
Yeah, which I got because I like the design and it's small. I don't use it much, to be honest. So I think that's the only accessory which so maybe my external drives, sometimes I connecting to those to the iPad Pro. Like I have a small G drive SSD, which is just containing some of the projects.
Yeah.
But I don't hook too much stuff up to the iPad Pro.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I do wish Apple would tweak with the Studio Display integration is let us use the webcam and have more control over monitor.
Actually, I was kind of surprised that they don't have that. Like, I was expecting, okay, I can just use the I don't know what it's called, like the FaceTime camera or whatnot. But you can, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, like it'd be. Yeah, I'm curious. Like the next OS update, we'll talk about kind of future iPad a little bit later, but Touch ID keyboards on the Mac. Like, it'd be so nice if you could use the iPad in clamshell mode, and just unlock it with the Bluetooth keyboard there with Touch ID. That'd be
actually that's also surprising. That I have the Magic Keyboard with Touch ID, and like that doesn't work either. So. I'm not sure why they
greater kind of additions to like really polish things out.
I think it's because they like do something like the external display support is actually quite a big feature to develop.
Huge. Yeah,
and I mean it's maybe this summer we're gonna have just how to say like bug fixes and feedback fixes from Apple.
Yeah. I mean, the addition of external display support, it was really radical as far as doing it and getting it stable, and it now is, and it's I'm loving that we have this ability. Like, it's really changed what I can change my iPad from like a laptop to a desktop in many ways. Like,
I mean, it still has some issues. So my most weird one, which I haven't actually found anything about it, and that's also with the Studio Display integration. It's kind of weird that when the iPad goes into sleep, it actually doesn't turn off the display. It still keeps the backlight on.
Yep.
Which I'm not sure why they do it like that, and it's actually quite annoying because I'm not sure. I haven't tested this, but I'm sure the display still draws power from the iPad that way. Yeah. So and the iPad as well. So. That's kind of weird. The other one, I sometimes like notice this issue when if you use the Magic Trackpad on the iPad directly, like plugging it into the iPad, there is no delay. But if you plug it into the studio display and plug the studio display into the iPad, there is some small delay that you can see.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think these issues gonna be solved after maybe this year's iPadOS upgrade. But yeah, I like the way that they redid the external display integration. Let's just copy the Mac, basically.
Yeah. And organizing where the displays are and all that. And yeah, it's nice. For Stage Manager, do you end up using a single stage and just swapping apps in, or you bounce between a couple stages?
I have some apps that go like logically together. Like I like to keep things with my calendar, and I think that's one of them. But I usually I don't care about window management on the iPad, so I just keep adding apps, and sometimes I just quit them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of I organize when I have to, basically.
Yes. Yeah. When you're using your MacBook Pro during the day job, what role does the iPad, if any, serve for you during that time? Is it a secondary kind of computer while you're also working on the Mac?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just keeping an eye on Slack. I don't know why, I just like to keep the weather open.
Yeah.
The weather app just as a dashboard. Checking my schedule, opening mail, just like doing secondary stuff. I try to have the iPad used as like a music box thing as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I failed because I pressed the play pause button a lot on the Magic Keyboard, and it's actually started to play music on my MacBook Pro, which was just loud.
Yeah.
So I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly just secondary apps throughout the day.
Yeah.
And of course, when I'm traveling, I actually use it as an external display to the MacBook Pro. So it's my yes.
Do you use Universal Control much?
Yes, I mostly use that. I mean, just connected through. Actually, we had this latest update to macOS and just broke my Universal Control for some reason. So my iPad doesn't appear since this morning. So it's kind of weird. Hopefully that's going to be resolved.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah. Anything else to note about the M2 iPad Pro before we move on to the iPad Mini?
I think that's about it.
Okay. So iPad Mini, this was a on sale device. You're like, why the hell not? Let's get it. And I love the Mini. It's a great form factor. I don't have one, the latest one, but I had a second generation Mini, and I freaking love that thing. What kind of experience do you find it jumping from the 11-inch with the higher display quality, ProMotion, all that stuff to the Mini? Is it once you're in the Mini, do you kind of forget about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the more radical changes when I'm going from the Mini to the iPad Pro, not because of ProMotion, but because of the size.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how feel when you go from the 11-inch to the 12.9 inch. Like it's a really big, feels a really big display. Like when I'm going from 11-inch to 8 point, I don't know what's the size of the iPad Mini, 8.6. I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. For a couple of seconds, you can see the choppy 60 FPS thing. I mean, it's still fast, but but I get used to it. I mean, I see the jelly scroll issue as well. I just don't care. I think it's you can. And I actually kind of weird that people picked that thing up. I don't know, last year was a big news that you have jelly scroll.
Right.
Actually, you have jelly scroll. You had jelly scrolling on, I think, even the first iPad Mini.
Oh, I'm sure.
I had that device, and it had the jelly scroll problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting because 11-inch to me is such a small iPad, but the Mini is so much smaller. Even that, it does feel noticeably different to use that.
Yeah, actually, if you check the size of the iPad Mini and the iPad Pro, you can see that Apple has these DPI classes for their displays. So the iPad mini basically has the same DPI as your iPhone. Mm-hmm. And I kind of think about the iPad mini as I would say, bigger, more capable iPhone with desktop-like apps.
Right.
And in that case, it kind of makes sense that you have the bigger iPad, which is actually have the same resolution, not the resolution, same DPI as the MacBook Pro, and stuff like that. So there is a separation, and I'm sure the
pixel density is super interesting with how they do that, because it's like, oh, you're supposed to use different distances because of stuff. Do you end up we didn't chat about this, the included with the latest update was being able to make the iPad's display show more or less things on the 11-inch. Do you have it set to show as much as possible, or is it kind of
No. I was actually really happy about that feature that I wanted to try, but I'm not sure. I don't know. It's just
too small.
It actually, I think, is physically the same size as the iPad mini.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like squint when I read that way. It's too small. But when I switch back to the normal mode, then it looks too big. So I don't know. I think we should have something in the middle.
The old person mode that I can just like
I don't use that. It's just comically big, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you have a smart cover with the mini, or what do you use that with? Yeah.
I just have a smart cover, basically. The smart folio. I don't know why, like Apple changing these folio names every.
It covers the back of the device.
Yeah. I have that, and it's actually like really helpful with the iPad mini. Usually, I just keep it in a standing mode. So having the folio is a nice thing.
And then you just share the same Apple Pencil between the mini, and it just pairs instantly, which is nice.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't even noticed the pairing. I just stick to it, and it does its thing. So
So you must be delighted as an Apple Books user, as am I, returning the delightful page animations with the latest OS update.
Well, I haven't really cared about that, to be honest. I mean, I'm happy that it's back, but I was fine with the just swiping.
You were okay.
But
I that was one of the things that I just was delighted by with the original iPads. Like, this is so fun.
It's better. Of course, it's better, but I haven't made a big deal about it.
Yeah. So, and Apple Books is your primary kind of reading for like fiction and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not reading too much fiction actually. I'm just reading a bunch of like. You could say productivity stuff, and sometimes I read maybe stuff from like I love science fiction novels and things like that. But I'm happy with iBooks, to be honest. Or now it's Apple Books, so they changed the name a couple of years ago.
Yep. Yeah, and then you also use the Reader app for RSS, and even Mastodon can be thrown in there. That as far as RSS, I used to use this back in the day, but it's been a while. Like, what kind of feeds are you picking out? Do you kind of make sure you're not getting too much volume in that app to be overwhelmed, or?
Yeah, I'm subscribed to actually a lot of RSS feeds, but I can keep up with them. So if something is not really interesting to me, I'm so, like, I just remove it. So I never had this problem with RSS. Like I use RSS for like 15 years now, so I have a pretty good workflow of how to process these things.
Yeah.
But I think the secret is that you don't think about it like processing, you're actually reading stuff.
Yeah. And as far as Mastodon being within Reader, why that versus a dedicated Mastodon client?
I just started when Reader had the update to integrate Twitter feeds into it. I was just I just tried it, and what I actually noticed that if you use Reader or any RSS app, basically you see only one thing at a time, and it made me a little bit more conscious about the feed or the stream. So it is still like I don't read too much Twitter these days, and I keep like some people went over to Mastodon. I wanted to stay out of it. Like, I think social media for me right now is only my blog and some comments about stuff.
Yeah.
But still, Reader is a nice way to keep up with the people who are on Mastodon or Twitter. So
gotcha.
It's like the distance is nice
and to be in read only versus writing your own stuff.
Yeah.
As far as calendaring, you use Fantastical, is that right?
I use Fantastical and I use Apple Calendar as well. Actually, both of them on my dock. Yeah. Okay. I love Fantastical for like the URL linking and automation, and their like booking features are awesome. But I just like how Apple Calendar feels. It's more minimal and more enjoyable for me.
Sure. Yeah. And then any other notes about the Mini before we move on?
One thing I would like to try out is actually having more accessories to the Mini. I mean, Apple had their ads. You can plug in basically displays, MIDI keyboards, all of these things. And I think yesterday I saw this guy I was listening to something on YouTube, and I think it was some set from a DJ, and he was actually using an iPad Pro for the complete set. Like there was no laptops around, and it was just the iPad. It was a 12.9-inch iPad, but I used to do. I like music, and I used to just mess around, like having a bedroom DJ basically, and I don't do it right now because I don't have the hardware and I don't have space. Basically, we just moved into this house a couple of months ago. But I plan to maybe get some accessories related to music making and just messing around with DJ stuff. And I think the iPad Mini is a great, or even the iPad Pro is a great device to be the brain of that setup. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some. In the hardware accessories and the apps, it's music's one of the powerful, as we'll talk about in the next segment. It's one of the powerful ecosystems with an iPad that just gets overlooked all the time.
Yeah. I mean, like Pro Apps is basically almost there with the music part of iPad OS.
And such a short
I would say the only thing that's still missing is like the multi-channel audio support, which I think it would be. At least give it to, Rogue Amoeba, let there do an app. Yeah, and then just that would be nice.
Yeah. No, agreed. And let's jump to it. So I came across your post on Mastodon from someone I follow, boosted your post about, should the iPad and Mac, should they collide to the single experience? And I think we're on the same page that they should not. They're very much unique platforms that should embrace their uniqueness. So, what inspired you to write this post first off? I guess
I was reading a lot of these about like I don't want to name people. I mean, I'm going to name people. Like one of the biggest iPad user, of course, is Federico Vitici. Yes. He's did so much work on getting iPad OS more productive, and I've seen his posts lately getting a lot of most of what he writes about is of course good feedback and it's valid, but I just start to feel like he just complains because of it makes clicks. Yeah, and I felt that this is actually start to spread in the Apple community of people, and I haven't seen any contradicting opinion about this.
Yeah,
I think the only person, I don't remember the guy's name, but I think he blogs at beardedguy.com or something like that.
Yeah, and Denny Henke.
Yeah, he had some iPad posts that you should, instead of complaining about there is no iPad like Pro level apps, you should actually look into the App Store. There's like a lot of them, and and it's it's I don't think that's fair. I mean, of course, iPad OS still more limited than the Mac.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah,
I'm not sure. Like we throw around this, the Mac should have touchscreen and they should merge the two systems. I don't think that's going to do any good for either platforms. I consider the iPad as its own entity, and what I've seen lately what Apple does when they get inspired by a Mac feature, they try to rethink it. Like one of the
trackpad's the best instance of this.
Well, actually, I would pick it's quite an ordinary feature, but it's so iPad-like. Is actually when you have an external drive. There's no eject.
No ejecting.
Thing. You just yank it and it's going to be fine. So I think that's one of the best examples of how you can have something that it's on the Mac for years now, but I wouldn't say reimagined, but just reconsidered on the iPad OS. And I think that's the right approach. Like my biggest concern with the iPad Pro work use, like a lot of people throw around these words like real work and whatnot. If you use the iPad for consumption, that's perfectly fine. The only thing you have to watch out when you're interested in using the iPad for work is that it's a different platform. I mean, there are concepts that are the same as on the Mac, but you basically have to relearn the whole thing.
If you move to Linux or Windows, you're going to have to relearn how to do your there as well.
At least you are a bit ahead because you have your content already in iPad OS, but still, like having the home screen versus your desktop is a different experience than on like you want to maybe use a desktop for store stuff.
Yeah.
On the iPad is basically it's a different way of working. So I think you have to be open-minded. When I switched to the Mac, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, I had the same, I wouldn't say open-mindedness because I was really into Apple stuff. Like I was really happy about the Mac as was back in 2006.
Yeah, that's exactly when I switched, and I was until then I had the Macworld subscription. And I was like, and then I finally got the Mac. It's like, ooh, let me dig in.
Yeah. I mean, same story. Yeah. Anyway, it was like I had to relearn a lot of stuff after Windows, so. I guess you have to do
time because we're at the time where the Mac is getting the iPad benefits of the Apple Silicon and the Apple hardware being. So we have all these people. It's like, ooh, the Mac's. It's like, the Mac's really good.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. But I mean, still there's difference. Like, I mean, if you look at the CPUs of these devices, the most, I would say, slowest one is basically your iPhone with the A series chips.
Yep.
If you jump up to an iPad Pro, you basically start to get the entry level of Macs with the M1, M2 chips. But still, if you go above, the only thing you have is basically MacBook Pros, Mac Studios, everything is Mac. So the top of, right now at least, the top of the iPad Pro, like the iPad experience is the iPad Pro. So and that's not the same performance as, for example, this MacBook Pro. So I wouldn't expect like Final Cut being available fully on the iPad Pro.
Yeah, I mean, I will say like Final Cut Pro, it runs well on MacBook Airs. Like I even used it on a 2011 MacBook Air back in the day when we had crappy Intel CPUs, and it was fast and performative. The renders take longer when you're exporting, but a lot of these Pro apps, can be handled pretty well on lower end chips, which is nice.
But it's not like if you work with Final Cut Pro, you can just push the hardware to its limits, basically. And I wouldn't expect like
you can do like a 18 multi-cam kind of thing with the
I mean that's like physically not possible.
No,
and I would just think about like the iPad Steel touch device with mostly the biggest display is for like 12.9 inch.
Yeah,
it's still small for compared to the external display. Of course, we now have external display support, so you can have bigger apps, but still, it's not the same as the Mac. So what I consider an iPad Pro app is maybe just the prosumer level on the Mac. So
and there's this discussion of no Pro apps, as you mentioned before, and there's more and more like the Affinity apps are all there now. Designer, Publisher is there, and Photo. DaVinci Resolve is the full app, and as we discovered, you can unlock some of those hidden tabs with the keyboard shortcut, which is kind of
I mean,
but yeah, as your post says, and a lot of these Apple publications aren't writing about a lot of these pro apps because they're writers, so it's kind of not in their wheelhouse to write about these creative professional level apps.
And people who actually could write about this or just make content about them, like maybe YouTubers. I've seen a couple of, test out the iPad for a week,
right?
For doing, I don't know, I don't remember the name of the video editor thing. Not DaVinci Resolve, the other one, which is big on iOS. Anyway, they tried it basically for a week, and they concluded that it's great, but I'm gonna back to my Mac because
that's where that person's comfortable.
That's I mean it's that, and I wouldn't argue. I mean, my job as a programmer, I try to replicate it on the iPad Pro. It sucks. It's even worse than maybe having video stuff. But I think the iPad Pro on its I don't think Apple made it for professionals like you are actually. Like video editing pays the bill for you. It's more like prosumer stuff that it's interesting on the iPad.
It's interesting with DaVinci Resolve. I had those guys on the show, and they're they sell hardware like keyboards and editing tools, and those work with the iPad version. So the little dials and stuff, those all are supported in that app. So you can do. I'd imagine pretty cool apps with their hardware, especially.
Yeah. Actually, the person who would be a nice, she has an opinion about this is my wife, because she used DaVinci Resolve way more than me. Whereas basically I never used DaVinci Resolve, so I don't have an opinion about it. But if you do it correctly, my other example would be Things. Like they have a really nice keyboard support in the iPad Pro. So I assume if you take the time and actually tweak the app and make the features available, that almost like Apple has these features for years now, like keyboard integration and things like that, you can actually get really far ahead.
My favorite example is, as a podcaster, is Ferrite. It feels like an app custom built for podcasting. Logic Pro seems less appropriate for this kind of work. And Ferrite, you can custom map the entire keyboard layout to whatever you want. It integrates with something I've not seen anyone really talk about, is this post-process. So with FaceTime calls, you can do something that voice isolates the audio. Apple actually allows developers to hook in directly to that for free as a plugin to post-process audio. That's a pretty powerful thing that Ferrite integrates with. So I can export our recording here using Apple's technology of voice isolation to cut out background noise and kind of enhance the audio.
It's actually pretty cool. I never heard about that.
No one's written about this, really. It's wild because it sounds, I think, better than the live processing during FaceTime calls because it's in post, so that you can have the knowledge of what's going on after the fact, kind of thing. So it's pretty
actually cool. I think a couple of years ago when I edited like way more podcasts than these days, I used the developer who actually have Ferrite has another app called, I'm gonna say it wrong, I think it's Hokusai or Hokusai or
talking about
it has a pretty nice noise cancellation plugin inside it, and I actually used that before I imported my stuff into Ferrite or into Logic. I actually used that app to just clean up the audio, and it was awesome.
And then the whole photo editing world, it's so nice. iPad photo, and like Lightroom's really good. Like there's so many just top class apps. One of the heads of the old Aperture team at Apple left and did his own app, and that's an iPad. It's like there's so many good
I mean, the guy can. I mean, I actually almost exclusively do my photo stuff on my iPad Pro, which is it's kind of like made for that
it is.
workflow.
You're touching images. If you have an XDR iPad Pro, you can throw it in reference mode to like get image accuracy with colors and stuff. Yeah. And then the other big thing that, kind of ignored, but, because it's not in the wheelhouse, is music. And this last year, we got both Dorco and Sibelius on iPad. Dorco is basically their exact desktop class app. All the features just carried over to iPad, MIDI keyboard and entry and all that stuff. Sibelius is the same foundation with kind of the iPad UI overlaid with it.
Yeah.
Both are very powerful desktop class apps that we've been waiting a decade for that are finally here, and no one really.
I read about Sibelius. I think. I mean, I'm not target audience for that, but I think I read about it on Mac Rumors or some of those sites. So I think they mentioned that like it's basically the perfect app for the iPad Pro.
Right.
You have the sheet of music and it's digital. You have touch. So I mean, it's a no-brainer.
I was a music composition major in college, so I've been waiting for like a Finale-like app for these 10 years, and we finally got Dorco is that to me, and I can hook up my USB MIDI keyboard, be playing something, hit a number on the number pad, and it's there, and you can write music now as I used to on iPad. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was into like writing music, like writing, but I just made electronic music, and it was awesome. Like 15 years ago on the Mac, I can't really imagine what you can do these days with an iPad Pro. I mean, you have touch basically. Like not a lot of people talk about GarageBand, but the touch instruments
they're good.
People use it for just messing around, but they're actually pretty good to do real stuff. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, Swift Playgrounds is a very new app, but it could evolve over the next few years into, I don't know, like, could you see it becoming a next generation of Xcode where if you're in Swift and just only Swift, it can be that place?
Yeah, I consider that actually just like a sub version of Xcode. I'm sure at this point, there is not going to be any Xcode on iPad
it's
OS
such a bloated, huge app at this point, right? I mean,
I don't even see the point. Like if you see what Apple does, you have Swift UI, which is their new, awesomeness, and Swift Playgrounds fully supports that. What I'm actually more interested in is actually having Swift Playground getting more features on iPad OS, because right now it's really cool, but if you like want to hook up, for example, core data, it's kind of you have to do a lot of boilerplate code. So there is a lot of things to do, but I think it's going to be awesome in 2 years, 3 years as they add more and more
those holes. Yeah. And then any hopes for the next few years of iPad OS updates? What direction do you hope to see the platform to go?
Oh, I have a lot of like low-hanging fruits. Actually, one thing I would spend time on if I was in the shoes of Craig Federighi is try to like iron out the keyboard bugs on iOS, because sometimes it just forgets that you have a keyboard and you have to remove the iPad Pro, put it back on the Magic Keyboard, and it's gonna just reset itself. And again, like if you use the Mac, you have awesome keyboard integrations, and I don't know, the iPad is just sometimes it's like feels weird. Like you can move around the UI using a keyboard, but it's just the animation's not there. Maybe like you have some weird animation that shouldn't be there, or it's just it doesn't feel right, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I would spend some time on that. From feature wise, to be honest, I don't really worry about what iPad OS would turn into. I mean, the only thing actually I am worrying about is, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, is our Electron getting into iOS. So for iPad OS, I don't really want that. I mean, you could limit that to just browsers only. So if Apple wants to avoid that, just I'm sure they're just gonna allow browsers to have the engine.
Right. So you don't have the Electron craft. Yeah. Well, anything we didn't touch on that you like to before we wrap it up?
I think we touch most of the things that it's interesting these days about iPadOS. So I wouldn't do too much.
Excellent. Yeah. And where can people find your blog and your work?
I just have one place on the web people can find me. It's decoding.io, which is my blog.
Yeah.
Everything is linked from there, so you can get my GitHub and whatever you're interested. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great chat. I've really enjoyed it.
No problem. I was glad to be here.
Well, that's my discussion with Zsolt. My thanks to him for his time recording, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.